I was just outside, out front, and I heard a cat. So I looked to the source of the sound, and I saw a cat lay down in the middle of the street. Then another cat ran out of the bushes and mounted the cat in the middle of the street, and they proceeded to screw. There seems to be a lot of horny cats in our neighborhood. The other night, Annetta and I were woken up by what sounded like a child crying in horrible pain, but it was actually a bunch of local cats having an all-night orgy. Yes, there are many horny cats in our neighborhood. Welcome back. What do horny cats have to do with this video? Not really anything, but it seemed like an appropriately surreal way to start things off as we talk about a couple movies I watched recently by David Lynch, one of my all-time favorite directors, and quite a surreal director that seems to like to have little anecdotes in his films that don't really relate to anything but are really interesting and weird. So, I've been a huge fan of David Lynch ever since Twin Peaks back in the early 90s, and for the most part, after seeing Twin Peaks, I went out and I checked out a lot of his other films. I went and I watched Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, which is kind of a precursor to Twin Peaks in some ways. Strange goings on in a small town. And but there was, being as big a fan as I am, there was still a few that I'd kind of missed along the way. Like, I hadn't seen Mulholland Drive until fairly recently. Great film, by the way. And there was a couple more in my collection that had just been sitting on the shelf for a couple of years now, and I realized, hey, I should really get off my ass and watch those, get caught up in my David Lynch stuff. So at this point, I'm happy to say I have seen almost all of his feature films and quite a few of his shorts as well. The only one I haven't seen at this point is The Straight Story, which is the story about a man who wants to go and visit his sick brother, but doesn't have a driver's license, doesn't have a lot of money, so he basically takes his lawn tractor across the U.S. to go and visit his brother, and it's sort of the story of his journey across America on his lawn tractor, and it's supposed to be quite good. The only reason I haven't seen it is because I haven't been able to find it anywhere. Nobody local seems to have it, so I think I'm just going to have to end up ordering that one online or something. So the two that I do have that I finally got around to watching are Wild at Heart and Inland Empire, two very, very different movies from David Lynch. We'll start with Wild at Heart. I'll just go in the order that I watched them. This originally came out in 1990, the same year that Twin Peaks was making a lot of headlines. I remember one critic at the time saying that 1990 was the year of David Lynch, and that's very much true, because everybody was talking about Twin Peaks at the time, and then he took a break from working on Twin Peaks for a while to direct Wild at Heart. And Wild at Heart actually ended up winning a few awards and such as well, so it got a lot of notice. Although critical response to Wild at Heart, and even response from fans, overall seems to have been very mixed. Now, what did I think of it? I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Essentially, it's a road movie. I guess The Straight Story is also a road movie, but this is a road movie in true David Lynch style. It's populated by just some really strange characters, and it's got a lot of distinct David Lynch moments in it. It's actually based on a novel by the same title, and looking at some of the extras on this, apparently the author of the original novel was really happy with the take that David Lynch had on it. And the two seem to be very, very much in sync in terms of how they perceive the characters and so forth. So Wild at Heart is the story of Sailor and Lula, It's essentially a love story wrapped in a road movie with a lot of David Lynch quirkiness thrown into the mix as well. Sailor is played by Nicolas Cage, and Lula is played by Laura Dern. And the story goes something like this, in very simplified form. Sailor and Lula are madly, passionately, devotedly in love. They will do anything and everything to stay together and to be together. Lula's mother, however, played brilliantly by Diane Ladd, guaranteed a role unlike anything you've ever seen Diane Ladd do before, will do anything to keep them apart, and actually goes to quite extensive lengths over the course of the film to keep them apart. And then Lula's father is played by Harry Dean Stanton, who is an actor that I've always enjoyed, ever since first seeing him as Brett in the first Alien film many moons ago. And he's actually appeared in quite a few of David Lynch's films as well. He's also in Inland Empire, and was also in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in a brief role. This one he plays a more substantial character than he tends to in some of Lynch's other films, and it was quite nice to see him doing a little bit more than he usually gets the opportunity to do, because, I mean, Harry Dean Stanton's just a fantastic actor, and I've always enjoyed him in everything I've seen him in. Now, I can't mention Wild at Heart without also mentioning Willem Dafoe as Bobby Peru. Now, we've all seen Willem Dafoe in countless things before, and he tends to play characters that are a little bit off-kilter. Bobby Peru is way off-kilter and just a crazy, crazy, slimy, sleazy, make you, squirm in your skin kind of character. And Willem Dafoe really just jumped into it with both feet with a lot of gusto, and obviously had a lot of fun playing up just how disgusting this character is. Seeing him in interviews in the extras, he was laughing through most of the interviews, talking about how he's fully aware of just how disgusting a character Bobby Peru is, but at the same time he had a blast playing him and sort of playing around with some of his more disturbing characteristics. Now, a lot of people I know don't like Nicolas Cage. Is an actor who gets wildly mixed reviews in anything he does, but honestly, and I'm kind of indifferent about him. I mean, like, if he's in something, great. If he's not in something, whatever. I don't go out of my way to watch a Nicolas Cage movie, but I don't particularly object to him either. In this particular movie, I think he was perfectly cast. Like, his performance as Sailor is great, and I think he was perfectly cast in the role. Now, Sailor essentially is a character who prides himself on his individuality, which in and of itself is kind of ironic, because a lot of his individuality is actually patterned after Elvis Presley. He's a huge Elvis fan. He knows pretty much all of Elvis's songs by heart, as well as a lot of his dance moves and whatnot. He's got the Elvis sideburns, and his mode of speech is unquestionably Elvis. So it's like, okay, so you pride yourself on your individuality, yet you seem to be emulating Elvis an awful lot. So it's interesting, because as you watch the movie and sort of see his character over the course of it, you begin to kind of see that, yeah, there's a lot of Elvisness to him, but at the same time there's a lot of individuality paired with that. So it's very strange, kind of interesting character. And Lula, played wonderfully by Laura Dern, the closest equivalent I can think of to Lula is her character reminded me a lot of Juliette Lewis as Mallory Knox in Natural Born Killers, except without the homicidal tendencies. Just as Mallory Knox was a very free spirit and kind of sexual character, Lula is very much like that as well. And almost a slave to her passions in some ways. She kind of gets caught up in some situations that are a little questionable, and doesn't really seem to resist those situations, shall we say. I really don't want to give too much away, because it's, as with most David Lynch films, it really is just sort of an experience in itself to watch and to go along with the ride. So overall, I found Wild at Heart to be just a very fast-paced, quirky, fun movie with a lot of dark humor in it. You'll notice that if you watch a lot of David Lynch's films, there's a lot of humor in it, but some people can't really, it's very unusual humor. Some people can't quite wrap their heads around it. They just kind of, they see the weirdness and can't look past that. Now, the characters, like a lot of the sort of walk-on parts and cameos and such in this film are very strange. They're very unusual. They have sort of almost instinctively familiar qualities about them, yet there's something slightly off-kilter with them. You know, it's kind of hard to describe. It's like they're familiar yet strange at the same time. The actors themselves who play a lot of these parts, you will recognize. There's a lot of recognizable character actors in this who you've undoubtedly seen in other things before. And you go like, you know, the kind of actors where you go like, oh hey, it's that guy who was in something. I know I've seen him before. And you don't know their names, but you totally recognize their faces and their mannerisms and such. And you know, it's like seeing an old friend whose name you can't quite remember. So there's a lot of characters like that throughout Wild at Heart, throughout their journey across America. Essentially, Sailor and Lula, due to events in the very first scene of the film, are on the run from the law. Essentially, they just want to escape their own pasts and start a fresh life together and be happy and not have to worry about anything and just, you know, bask in each other's love and enjoy being together. But Lula's mother, as I mentioned before, will essentially stop at nothing to tear them apart, and she goes to excruciating lengths to try to make that happen, and things get just crazily out of control, and it just takes so many twists and turns along the way. You really don't know how it's going to end up. I mean, this is a David Lynch movie, so it may have a happy ending, it may not. You don't really know. The only way to find out is to watch the movie. So, overall, I would say that Wild at Heart is ringing the phone. Okay, I'm back. It's a couple days later. You'll notice I'm wearing different clothes and I need to shave again. But I have showered since the previous video. Where the heck were we? We were talking about Wild at Heart. Okay, sorry, I didn't have an opportunity to sit down and continue this until now. Now, one other thing I need to talk about with Wild at Heart is the performance of Diane Ladd as Lula's mother. Now, those of you who are familiar with Diane Ladd's previous work, you know, from the 70s and 80s, will definitely find her performance in this, shall we say, a little different from what you've seen before. She really just threw herself into the role, and when she talks about the development of her character in the interviews and such, one of the things she talks about is how, you know, it's too bad that it took so long for David Lynch and I to work together, because little did he know that I was the perfect David Lynch actress. And in many ways she is, because she really gets the quirkiness of David Lynch's characters and really turns it up to 11 with her performance as Lula's mother. There's a scene, without giving too much away, there's a scene where Lula's mother is putting on lipstick. That's all I'm going to say. But suffice it to say, when you see this scene, you will never forget it. It is really, I think, a defining moment for her character and her madness and obsession with tearing Lula and Sailor apart. And I urge you, after watching the movie, to check out the interviews, because she talks at, you know, considerable length about that scene and what her kind of mindset was as far as what she does in that scene. And I think it's just brilliant. It's great stuff. So I guess to sum up, Wild at Heart. I would definitely consider this to be one of David Lynch's more accessible films, if you've never experienced any of his films before. Now, David Lynch has done some more, shall we say, commercial films in the past. For example, there was The Elephant Man, which was nominated for no less than 8 Academy Awards. Just a beautiful, beautiful film. And then, of course, his adaptation of Frank Herbert's classic science fiction novel, Dune. Now, these are definitely the most accessible because they're the most normal films. But if you want something that's both accessible and will also give you a little bit more of a glimpse into the craziness of the worlds and imagination of David Lynch, then I would definitely recommend Wild at Heart. It's a lot of fun, and it's more or less a straightforward narrative with a nice convenient beginning, middle, and end. It's really not difficult to follow at all. The other one I would recommend, of course, is Blue Velvet, which is just fantastic. This was the first thing I ever saw Dennis Hopper in, and he's the main villain in this, and he is so freaking scary. You will never forget his performance in this. So, there you go. Your David Lynch starter kit right here. So, enjoy. And then, of course, you can't go without saying, check out Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks was like the Lost of its day. Just completely addicting and keeps you guessing, and just loaded with interesting characters and storylines. And it's great stuff. And you can usually pick up the gold box fairly cheap, and it's got the whole series in it. Okay, so I don't know what more I can say. Long and the short of it is, I enjoyed Wild at Heart immensely. I thought it was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are kind of iffy about it. They don't consider it one of David Lynch's strongest ones. Maybe it's the fact that it was based on a novel rather than being a full-blown original David Lynch creation. But there is enough of his sort of trademark strangeness in there that I think it fits in nicely with his pantheon of cinematic explorations. Alright, so next time we'll talk about one that is very definitely 100% pure Lynch, Inland Empire, starring Justin Theroux, Jeremy Irons, and Laura Dern. Not necessarily in that order. Alrighty, so until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara. Then I would definitely recommend Wild at Heart. It's a lot of fun. It's and it's more or less a straight story. Well,